So I'm going to talk a bit about creature animation. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the basic physics behind body motion. And in terms of creature animation, Disney is very cool, but Disney is not the whole story. And we need to kind of analyze the physics of motion much more deeply if you want to create something that's realistic. So I'm going to talk about some basics in the physics, and I'm going to introduce a few terms that I use so that people who are talking to me know what's going on. Right, so the first one is turning points and extreme points. Very simply, if I throw this wallet up and down, then the extreme points, the turning points, are just where it's leaving my hand and where it's hovering in the air. So there's a turning point here where the direction and the speed changes. That's really all there is to it. And when we're animating, we're looking for these extreme points and turning points in our motion. And those are the keyframes we want to hit. The keyframes are key poses. And we're looking for changes in speed or changes in direction, and we want a keyframe there. So if you're analysing video or even motion capture frame, you can look for these turning points and use those as your key poses. Okay, so the next thing is something is common sense. We should all be aware of it, but again, if we're sitting on our chairs all day, we become very frozen as beings, and we try and forget about this. But I'm just going to talk about stability, and two types of stability: dynamic stability and static stability. So static stability is very simple. I'm doing it right now. My centre of gravity is over the points of contact with the ground, and I'm stable. I'm not falling over. If I remove a point of contact from the ground, I'm going to tip one way or the other. And in fact, I'm tipping around the point of contact with the ground. And gravity is accelerating, so gravity has taken hold of my centre of mass and is driving the rotation. And in fact, if you want static stability, you should be able to look at the character from above or below and make sure that the centre of gravity, the centre of mass, is above the points of contact on the ground, and then the character will be stable. So I have a range of stability, which is all the way from here to here. So here, at all times, my centre of gravity is over my feet. Equally, if my centre of gravity is off-centred this way, I'm going to tip forward. If my centre of gravity is off-centred backwards, I'm going to tip backwards. So that's static stability. So the next thing is dynamic stability. And see, when people are doing their moving holds and they bring characters to a stop, they forget about the static. They're thinking in terms of static stability, but not in terms of dynamic stability. So when you're bringing something to a stop, there's still momentum in the body. And you have to make sure that you're killing off that momentum with either leg compression or just by using gravity. So in terms of dynamic stability, there's a stable point. If I kick off the ground here, I reach a kind of stable point where I'm just on balance before I fall back down again. But everything's in control. I'm still stable, but it's dynamic. If I overcook it, if I kick too hard, then I'm off balance, and I'm just going to teeter over unless I compensate somehow. And that's really all there is to it. So if I'm walking, depending on how fast I'm going, you're going to see a change in the size of my pelvis movement based on speed. So if I'm walking very slowly, I'm moving between kind of static stability all the time. So I'm pushing out onto one leg, and then I'm statically stable over it. And then I move over to the other side, and I'm statically stable over the other leg. The faster I go, the more dynamic the stability comes, and the smaller the pelvis movement becomes. And I can practically, but not precisely, keep my pelvis almost down the centre line as I move forward, because I'm in dynamic stability all the time. So that's dynamic stability. The next thing is based in kind of really Newton, and everybody's heard that force equals mass times acceleration, but it's important to realise that mass times acceleration also equals force. So whenever you move some part of the body, you're exerting a force on the rest of the body. So if you think in terms of a rocket, the rocket has a bunch of mass in terms of fuel, and it's chucking it out one end. We're getting a massive acceleration of that mass, and that is producing a force which is accelerating the rocket. So if I throw my arm out, there's a kick to the arm. It's kicking the rest of my body around. And this is a kind of dynamic, the momentum of the arm is pushing me around. So we still have a kind of static and a dynamic element to this. So if one part of the body, the whole rest of the body moves to compensate. And so this is the main principle. Everything always moves. There is never a point where one part of the body is isolated and moving independently of everything else. It's always connected. So I see like if people are doing character animations, they'll be gesturing. Gesturing is good because that's character animation, right? And it tends to look a bit like this. Hello, how are you doing? And it's hard actually to make it that wooden because I can't freeze my body. I mean, this is obviously a bad performance, but it's also bad physics because every time I move my arm, it's exerting a little force on my body, either to accelerate it or to stop it. And also, I'm changing my centre of gravity all the time. So, if I'm raising my arm, at the moment when I'm standing like this, then my centre of gravity is like here and it's over my feet. If I move my arms, well, then my arms are heavy. They have weight. So by moving my arms forward like this, I'm changing my body's centre of gravity because these things are heavy. So now my centre of gravity is moved forward, and I have to move everything back ever so slightly so that my centre of gravity is comfortably over the centre of my feet. If I don't change my centre of gravity, then raising my arms is going to put me onto my tiptoes, and that's not very comfortable. So I'm wanting to sit back and find this kind of comfort point all the time. So that's the other key, is that we're always, as human beings, looking to kind of move with a minimum of effort, and when we get that kind of minimum effort right, then it looks flowing and it looks graceful. So here we are. So we've got make sure that when you're moving limbs, you're compensating for change of gravity, change of centre of gravity, but also as things move faster, you're seeing things. If I move one arm, it's going to flick the rest of the body around, either to accelerate it or stop it. So in case of both arms, I'm either going to fling my body back by flinging my arms forward, or I'm going to need to prep the motion somewhere. I'm going to need to compensate, anticipate and compensate for this force exerted by throwing my arms, and I'm going to need to prep by actually moving onto my tiptoes so that I can fling my arms without flinging myself back too severely. But again, if I overcompensate, if I'm right on the cusp of balance here, so I'm right on my tiptoes, if I throw my arms forward, then stopping my arms was also a force, and that kind of jerk on my body will actually tip me over. Okay, so there we have it. So in summary, we have turning points are the key frames that you're looking for when you're examining motion. So you're looking for changes in direction, changes in speed. Static stability, where things aren't moving but the centre of gravity is over the points of contact with the ground. And dynamic stability, where we're always compensating for changes in motion, and we're looking for this kind of action line so that the centre of gravity is at an angle. We've got this kind of action line. If I want to stop and I'm coming this way, then I have this action line which is between the point of contact with the ground, my centre of gravity, and you can see it's driving me back this way. So the fact that the centre of gravity here, gravity is pulling me down that way, and it's rotating me that way and stopping me, it's decelerating me and forcing me back the other way. That's dynamic stability. And then everything is always moving, everything's always connected, nothing ever stops. So you should never see independent movement, you should never see isolated bits of movement where the rest of the body doesn't compensate, even if it's very small. And this is the real trick to realistic animation. These small little motions that where you compensate for the whole body action, where these limbs are creating forces within the entire body. If you can nail these small bits of motion that the body compensates for what's apparently the bigger motion. So this is the big motion, but the rest of my whole body compensates for this big motion with little changes. If you can nail these little changes in the body structure, that's when you start to get some big realism boosts. Yeah. So yeah, that's me. This is the brief introduction to body mechanics, and I hope that is helpful.